Your contribution is replaceable, sweetheart. My wife sneered when she became the new VP as she fired me. After my replaceable role cost them 4 top accounts and $80 million, the CEO ordered me back, threatening to sue based on my employment contract if I refused. In the emergency meeting, I just pointed to one small line. Our lawyer read the clause carefully, my wife's eyes widening. She looked straight at the CEO as the room fell silent, as she began to shake, whispering, "Oh my God. You know that feeling when you're about to get sucker punched by someone you trust?" Yeah, well, multiply that by 12 years of marriage and a corporate hierarchy that would make Machiavelli weep with pride, and you'll get close to understanding my Tuesday morning. I'm sitting in my sad little cubicle, and let me tell you, after 15 years at this company, a cubicle is basically corporate purgatory. When I see her coming, Sabrina Hale, my wife, my supposedly loving partner in this beautiful disaster we call matrimony, and she's walking toward me with that particular stride that screams, "I'm about to ruin your entire goddamn day." Now, let me paint you a picture here. Sabrina's got this way of moving through the office like she's conducting an orchestra of misery. Every step calculated, every glance measured, every breath designed to remind you that she's climbing the ladder while you're still figuring out which rung you're supposed to be on. She's wearing her power suit, you know, the one navy blue with shoulder pads that could cut glass. And her smile is locked and loaded like a weapon of mass destruction. She leans on the edge of my cubicle, and I swear to God, she does it like she owns not just the building, but the entire city block it sits on. Her manicured nails, blood red, naturally tap against the cheap particle board that some genius in facilities probably thought looked professional. The sound echoes through the office like a death nail, and I can feel every pair of eyes in the vicinity suddenly finding their computer screens absolutely fascinating. "We need to talk," she says, but her voice has that quality that makes your skin crawl. You know the tone, syrup poured over broken glass, sweet enough to make you lean in close before it slices you open. It's the voice she uses when she's about to deliver news that'll make you question every life choice that led you to this exact moment in time. I look up from my monitor where I've been reviewing renewal contracts, the same contracts that have been keeping this company's lights on for the better part of a decade. And I see it. That smile. Jesus Christ, that smile. It's the kind of expression that serial killers probably practice in the mirror. The kind that says, "I'm enjoying this way more than any normal human being should." Her lips are curved just enough to show teeth, and her eyes have that particular gleam that means someone's about to get royally screwed. And, spoiler alert, it ain't going to be her. "Your contribution is replaceable, sweetheart," she says. And the way she draws out that word, replaceable, like she's savoring a fine wine, makes my stomach drop faster than the company stock price after our last quarterly report. The sweetheart part? That's just salt in the wound. 12 years of marriage and she's calling me sweetheart while she's about to drop the corporate equivalent of a nuclear bomb on my career. Now, here's where it gets really rich. Sabrina just got promoted to vice president last week. The board had what they called a restructuring meeting, which in corporate speak translates to, "Let's shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic and see who ends up underwater." Apparently, restructuring means giving your wife a corner office and the authority to fire her own husband in front of half the sales floor because nothing says professional integrity like a little nepotism with a side of public humiliation. The whole office is watching now. They're not even pretending to work anymore. Karen from accounting is practically hanging over her cubicle wall like she's watching a gladiator match. Steve from marketing has his mouth hanging open like he's catching flies. Even old Mr. Peterson from legal, and that guy hasn't shown emotion since the Clinton administration, is staring over his reading glasses with something that might actually be shock. But Sabrina, She's eating this up. She's practically glowing with the power trip of it all. This is her moment. Her chance to show everyone in the office that she's not just some executive's wife who got a promotion because of her last name. She's making a statement, and that statement is, I don't give a damn who you are or how long we've been married. I will burn you down if it means climbing one more rung up this corporate ladder. 10 minutes later, and I'm timing this because when your life implodes, you start paying attention to the little details. I'm sitting in one of those glass-walled HR conference rooms that make you feel like a fish in a bowl. Pauline from HR is across from me, and bless her heart, she's trying to look sympathetic while she slides a severance packet across the table like she's dealing poker. The packet is thick, probably full of legal jargon designed to make sure I can't sue them into the next century. And there's a company tote bag sitting next to it, like some kind of consolation prize. A tote bag. After 15 years of building relationships, closing deals, and basically keeping this place afloat, they're sending me off with a canvas bag that probably cost them $3 at a promotional company. They've already deactivated my badge. That little piece of plastic that's been clipped to my belt for the better part of 2 decades. Dead is disco. They've locked me out of the system, cut off my email, and probably changed all the passwords I might have known. It's like corporate excommunication. 1 minute you're part of the family, the next minute you're persona non grata, with a tote bag and a handshake. But here's what they don't know, and this is where it gets interesting. In my desk, the same desk that's probably being cleaned out by security as we speak, sits 15 years worth of relationship maps, renewal scripts, and personal contracts that I've built with our top clients. Not the company's contracts, mind you. Personal contracts. Client relationships that have my name written all over them. Literally. And legally. 4 of our biggest accounts have key person clauses that specifically name me as the point of contact. Me, not the company. Not my replacement. Me. These aren't just business relationships. They're friendships, partnerships, trust built over years of late-night phone calls, birthday cards to clients, kids, and showing up when other companies wouldn't. When Jim Morrison over at Peterson Industries needed someone to walk him through a crisis at 2 in the morning, he didn't call the company switchboard. He called me. When Sarah Chun needed to restructure her entire procurement process, she didn't want some fresh-faced MBA. She wanted someone who understood her business inside and out. That someone was me. Sabrina thinks I'm going to slink away with my tail between my legs. Probably go home and drink beer while I update my resume and pretend this whole thing was just a bad dream. She thinks 15 years of relationship building and client management can be replaced by whoever they stick in my chair, and a couple of training sessions. She thinks that because she's got the title in the corner office, she's got the power. But I know better. Oh, I know so much better. See, while she was climbing the corporate ladder and playing office politics, I was building something that can't be replaced by a job posting on LinkedIn. I was creating dependencies, establishing trust, and making myself not just valuable, but irreplaceable in ways that go way beyond what's written in my employment contract. The beautiful thing about client relationships is that they're personal. You can fire an employee, but you can't fire 15 years of trust. You can deactivate a badge, but you can't deactivate loyalty. And you definitely can't restructure your way out of contractual obligations that were written specifically to protect both the client and the person they've chosen to work with. So yeah, I'm walking out of here today. I'm taking my tote bag and my severance packet and my wounded pride, and I'm going to go home and pour myself a drink. But I'm not slinking away. I'm not disappearing into the unemployment line with my tail between my legs. I'm counting days because in about 72 hours, when the first renewal notices start hitting desks and the clients start asking where I am, Sabrina's going to learn a very expensive lesson about the difference between being replaceable and being irreplaceable. And trust me, that's going to be one hell of an education. You know what's funny about getting fired? There's this weird moment of clarity that hits you right between the holy shit, this is actually happening, and the how am I going to pay my mortgage panic. It's like your brain suddenly switches into this hyper-focused mode where every detail becomes crystal clear. Every sound gets amplified, and every person you pass becomes a character in the story of your professional execution. I'm walking through the office now, carrying my pathetic little cardboard box of personal items. A coffee mug that says "World's Okayest Employee." Ironic, considering a picture of me and Sabrina from happier times that I'm definitely throwing in the trash when I get home, and some random office supplies that I probably stole from the supply closet over the years. But tucked under my arm, pressed against my ribs like it's made of solid gold, is something they don't know about. Something that's going to make this whole corporate soap opera a lot more interesting. The Lighthouse Binder. My baby, my masterpiece. 15 years of relationship management methodology condensed into a 300-page Bible of how to actually keep clients happy, instead of just pretending to care about their needs during quarterly reviews. This isn't some generic sales manual that HR cooked up during a team-building retreat. This is real-world, battle-tested, client-approved methodology that I've been licensing to the company every single year since I developed it. See, here's something most people don't understand about corporate America. Everything's a license agreement if you're smart enough to make it one. When I first developed the Lighthouse system, I could have just handed it over to the company and called it a day. But I wasn't born yesterday, and I damn sure wasn't going to let some MBA with a corner office take credit for my life's work. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I kept the intellectual property rights and licensed it to them annually. Renewable contract, renegotiable terms, and most importantly, revocable if they decided to be idiots. Guess what just became revocable? I'm passing the reception desk now, and Patricia gives me this look that's half sympathy, half curiosity. She's been the face of this company for longer than most of the executives have been alive, and she's seen enough good people get marched out by bad leadership to write a book about it. Her eyes say what she can't, that this whole thing stinks worse than the fish sandwich they serve in the cafeteria on Fridays. "Take care of yourself, honey," she says, and there's genuine warmth in her voice that makes my chest tighten a little bit. Patricia's good people. She remembers birthdays, asks about your kids, and actually gives a damn when you're having a rough day. She's everything this company used to stand for before it got taken over by spreadsheet warriors and PowerPoint generals. But it's Marcus who really gets it. Marcus, the security guard who's been posted by the front entrance for the past 8 years, watching the revolving door of corporate casualties come and go. He's this big, gentle giant of a guy who knows everyone's name and always has a kind word when you're having a shitty Monday. When he sees me approaching with my box of shame and my forced smile, his expression shifts into something that looks like righteous anger. "Man, this is bullshit," he says quietly, and the way he says it makes it clear that this isn't the first time he's watched someone get railroaded by the suits upstairs. "You're one of the good ones. Everyone knows it." I stop in front of his desk, and for a moment I consider telling him about the Lighthouse Binder, about the renewal dates I've got memorized, about the beautiful chaos that's about to unfold over the next few weeks. But Marcus doesn't need to get caught up in the crossfire of what's coming. He's got a family to feed and bills to pay, just like the rest of us working stiffs trying to make it in this corporate wasteland. "Thanks, man," I tell him instead. "You keep your head down and stay out of the way for the next few weeks, all right? Things might get a little bumpy around here." He gives me a look that says he understands more than he's letting on. And I realize that Marcus has probably seen this movie before. He's watched the dominoes fall when key people get pushed out, seen the way client relationships crumble. When companies think they can just plug in a replacement and expect everything to keep running smoothly, I don't argue with Sabrina on my way out. I don't stop by her new corner office to have some dramatic confrontation where I tell her exactly what I think about her leadership style and her questionable morals. I don't make a scene in the elevator or flip off the building as I walk to my car. Silence is a weapon when you know how to use it. And right now, silence is my best friend. See, here's what most people don't understand about revenge. The best kind is the kind that doesn't look like revenge at all. It looks like natural consequences. It looks like the inevitable result of bad decisions made by people who thought they were smarter than they actually were. And the most beautiful part, they do it to themselves while you sit back and watch the show. Sabrina thinks she just removed an obstacle from her path to corporate glory. She thinks she eliminated someone who might have been holding her back or stealing her thunder or whatever narrative she's constructed in her head to justify stabbing her own husband in the back. What she doesn't realize is that she just pulled the pin on a grenade and handed it back to me with a smile. In my head, the plan is already forming like some kind of beautiful mathematical equation where every variable has been accounted for and every outcome calculated. I know the renewal calendar better than I know my own anniversary date, which, let's be honest, is probably going to be a moot point pretty soon. Anyway, I know exactly when each of our top 4 clients is going to get their renewal notices. I know exactly what their key person clauses say, and I know exactly what's going to happen when they start asking questions that Sabrina and her team can't answer. Client number 1, Morrison Industries, comes up for renewal in 3 days. Jim Morrison is old school, the kind of guy who still believes a handshake means something, and loyalty goes both ways. He's been working with me personally for 7 years, and his contract specifically states that any major personnel changes require 60 days notice and client approval. They just violated that clause about 10 minutes ago. Client number 2, Chin Enterprises, renews next week. Sarah Chin doesn't just buy services. She buys relationships. She's told me on multiple occasions that the only reason she stays with our company is because she trusts me to handle her account personally. Her key person clause includes termination rights if I'm no longer available. Oops. Client number 3, the Peterson Group, has a renewal coming up in 2 weeks, and client number 4, Blackstone Holdings, is up at the end of the month. Both have similar clauses. Both have relationships built on personal trust and years of consistent service. And both are about to discover that their primary contact just got shown the door by his own wife. The bleed is coming, and when it starts, it's not going to stop with a band-aid and a corporate apology. This is going to be arterial. The kind of bleeding that makes accountants wake up in cold sweats and CEOs start updating their resumes. But I'm getting ahead of myself right now. I'm just a guy walking to his car with a cardboard box and a leather binder trying to figure out how to break the news to his soon-to-be ex-wife that her brilliant power play just cost the company about $80 million in annual revenue. The irony is almost too perfect. She thought she was firing dead weight. Turns out she just cut the rope that was holding the whole operation together. 2 days. That's all it took for the first domino to fall. And let me tell you, the sound it made was absolutely beautiful. I'm sitting in my home office, which is really just the spare bedroom with a desk I bought from IKEA and assembled with the kind of rage that only comes from Swedish furniture instructions. When my phone starts buzzing like an angry wasp, the caller ID says, Eli Martinez, Operations. And I know this is going to be good. Eli is one of the few people at the company who still talks to me, mainly because he's got the kind of job security that comes from being the only person who actually understands how their ancient computer systems work. He's like a digital archaeologist, the guy they call when something breaks and nobody can figure out why the server room is making that weird humming noise that sounds like a dying whale. More importantly, Eli's got his finger on the pulse of everything that happens in that building, from executive bathroom gossip to client meltdowns. Mate, he says the second I pick up, and I can hear the grin in his voice. You are not going to believe the absolute fucking show that just went down in the conference room. Now Eli's got this Australian accent that makes everything sound either incredibly laid back or completely insane, depending on the context. Right now, it's definitely leaning toward the insane side. And I can practically picture him sitting at his desk, surrounded by the usual chaos of cables and computer parts, trying not to laugh loud enough to get himself fired. "Try me," I say, leaning back in my chair and putting my feet up on the desk. I've got a beer open. It's barely noon, but hey, unemployment has its perks, and I'm ready to hear about whatever fresh hell Sabrina has unleashed on the unsuspecting masses, right? So, your lovely wife, and I use that term with all the sarcasm I can muster. She rolled out her brilliant retention plan this morning. Eli continues, and I can hear him typing in the background, probably pulling up the disaster in real time. 1 webinar, 3 mass emails, and a PDF attachment that looks like it was designed by a drunk intern with a grudge against readable fonts. I nearly choke on my beer. That's it. That's her big strategy to keep our top clients happy. Oh, it gets better, mate. The webinar was titled, "Transitioning to Excellence, Your New Account Management Experience." I fuck you not. That was the actual title. And get this. She presented it herself wearing what I can only describe as a power suit that could probably be seen from space. Talking about streamlined communication processes and optimized service delivery paradigms. The mental image of Sabrina standing in front of a PowerPoint presentation, spouting corporate buzzwords while our clients sit there wondering where the hell their actual account manager went, is almost too perfect. It's like watching someone try to perform surgery with a chainsaw while insisting they're being more efficient. Please tell me you recorded it, I say, because this is the kind of train wreck you want to preserve for posterity. Better, Eli laughs. I've got the chat logs from the webinar. Jim Morrison from Morrison Industries joined the call, listened for exactly 12 minutes, then typed in the chat box, and I quote, "Where is my actual account manager?" When Sabrina explained that they were implementing a new team-based approach, he typed, "This is horse shit," and left the call. Jim Morrison, God bless that beautiful, cantankerous old bastard. 7 years of working with him, and I know exactly how his brain works. He's the kind of client who still believes in doing business with people, not companies. He wants to know who's handling his account. He wants their direct phone number, and he wants them to answer when he calls. The idea of dealing with some faceless, team-based approach probably made him want to throw his computer out the window. So, what happened next? I ask, though I'm pretty sure I already know. Well, Morrison's assistant called about an hour after the webinar ended. Sweet little old lady named Dolores. You know her, right? Anyway, she's asking to speak directly with you about their renewal notice. When they told her you were no longer with the company, she got quiet for about 10 seconds, then said, and I quote, "Mr. Morrison is going to be very disappointed to hear that." The beauty of key person clauses is that they're not suggestions. They're contractual obligations. Morrison Industries specifically negotiated the right to terminate their agreement if their designated account manager was no longer available without proper notice and transition procedures. Proper notice means 60 days minimum, not a mass email and a webinar about paradigm shifts. Eli, tell me you have access to the renewal tracking system. I say because I need to know exactly how this played out. Of course I do. I built the damn thing, he replies, and I can hear more typing. Let me pull up Morrison's file. Holy shit, mate. They didn't just complain. They sent official termination notice this morning, citing Section 4.7 of their service agreement, failure to maintain designated personnel without proper notification. There it is. The first crack in Sabrina's perfect little empire. $18 million in annual revenue gone, with a politely worded letter from Dolores and a key person clause that Sabrina apparently never bothered to read. What was the reaction upstairs? I ask, though I'm pretty sure I can guess. Oh, that's the best part, Eli says, and I can practically hear him rubbing his hands together with glee. Sabrina called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. According to Karen from accounting, who by the way has ears like a satellite dish when it comes to conference room drama, Sabrina spent 20 minutes explaining how Morrison was just going through a transition adjustment period and would probably come around once they saw the value of the new approach. I have to laugh at that. Sabrina is living in some alternate reality where $18 million in revenue is just a minor hiccup, the temporary setback that'll resolve itself once the clients realize how much better off they are without their dedicated account manager. It's like watching someone stick their finger in a dam that's about to burst and insisting everything's fine. Did anyone point out that Morrison has a contractual right to terminate? I ask. That's where it gets really good, mate. Jonathan Kane, our fearless CEO, apparently asked Leonard Cross to review the contract language. When Leonard confirmed that Morrison was well within their rights to walk away, the room got so quiet Karen could hear people breathing through the ventilation system. Leonard Cross, the company's general counsel and the closest thing they have to someone who actually reads the fine print. Leonard's the guy who probably warned them about those key person clauses years ago, back when the contracts were being negotiated. But nobody listens to the lawyers until the desk hit hits the fan. And by then, it's usually too late to do anything except count the zeros on the damage estimate. So, what's Sabrina's next brilliant move? I ask, settling back to enjoy the unfolding disaster. Well, according to my sources, and by sources I mean Karen, who was refilling the coffee machine outside the conference room, Sabrina suggested that maybe they could convince Morrison to reconsider if they offered some kind of discount or service upgrade. Jonathan apparently just stared at her for about 30 seconds, then asked if she understood what contractual termination rights actually meant. The mental image of Sabrina trying to negotiate with a client who's already legally walked away is almost too perfect. It's like trying to return a rental car after you've already driven it off a cliff. The paperwork's been processed, the damage is done, and no amount of corporate double talk is going to change the reality of the situation. Here's the thing that's really got them spooked. Eli continues, lowering his voice like he's sharing state secrets. Morrison wasn't just any client. They were the flagship account, the one they put on all their marketing materials and client presentations. Losing them isn't just about the revenue. It's about credibility. Other clients are going to notice that their biggest success story just walked away. And that's when I realized the true beauty of what's happening. This isn't just about money, though. $18 million is nothing to sneeze at. This is about reputation, about the story that gets told when potential clients start asking why Morrison Industries decided to take their business elsewhere after 7 years of partnership. Eli, do me a favor, I say, finishing the last of my beer and already reaching for another one. Keep an eye on the renewal calendar for the next couple of weeks. I have a feeling Morrison was just the opening act. Already on it, mate, he laughs. Shin Enterprises is up next week, and from what I hear, Sarah Chun has been trying to reach you directly ever since the news broke. Her assistant called 3 times yesterday asking for your personal contact information. Sarah Chun, another 7-year relationship, another key person. Klaus, another $18 million in annual revenue that's about to evaporate like morning dew in the desert sun. The dominoes aren't just falling. They're launching themselves off the table with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for Black Friday shoppers and politicians during election season. This is going to get interesting, I say. And for the first time since Sabrina marched me out of that building, I'm genuinely enjoying myself. Interesting is one word for it, Eli replies. Catastrophic is another, but hey, at least the coffee machine's working again. After I hang up with Eli, I sit back in my chair and let the full scope of what's happening wash over me. Sabrina thought she was making a power play, eliminating someone she saw as competition or dead weight. What she actually did was take a sledgehammer to the foundation of their client relationships. And now she gets to watch the whole structure come tumbling down. The beautiful thing about revenge is that sometimes you don't have to do anything at all. Sometimes you just have to wait for gravity to do its work. My home office has turned into mission control for the most beautiful corporate meltdown I've ever witnessed. I've got a whiteboard that I borrowed from my neighbor's kid. Don't ask. Long story involving a beer and a promise to help with his science fair project. And it's covered with red circles around dates that are about to become very, very expensive for my former employer. It's like having a countdown timer to Christmas. Except instead of presents under the tree, there are going to be termination notices landing on desks like guided missiles. 9 days until client number 2. 15 days until client number 3. 23 days until client number 4. Each date is circled in bright red marker because there's something deeply satisfying about the visual representation of impending doom. I'm sitting here with my morning coffee. Unemployment has at least improved my caffeine schedule, staring at those numbers like a general studying a battle plan. Except in this war, I don't have to fire a single shot. All I have to do is wait for the enemy to shoot themselves in the foot. Client number 2 is Chun Enterprises, and if Jim Morrison was the warning shot, Sarah Chun is going to be the artillery barrage. I've been working with Sarah for 7 years, ever since she took over her family's import business and decided to drag it, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century. She's sharp as a tack, tougher than a $2 steak, and has exactly zero patience for corporate arging or excuses. Sarah doesn't just buy services from vendors. She builds partnerships with people she trusts. I remember the first time we met, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I don't care what your company promises me. I care what you promise me." Because at the end of the day, when something goes wrong at 3 in the morning, I'm not calling your CEO. I'm calling you. That was 7 years ago, and she's called me at 3 o'clock in the morning exactly 4 times since then. Each time I answered. Each time I fixed whatever crisis was threatening to derail her operations. Each time, she remembered exactly who showed up when she needed them most. That's not the kind of relationship you replace with a webinar and a team-based approach. Her key person clause is even more ironclad than Morrison's, where Morrison just had termination rights. Sarah negotiated for immediate cancellation without penalty if her designated account manager was removed without her explicit approval. She learned that trick from a bad experience with her previous vendor, who tried to pawn her off on some junior account rep after 3 years of working with their senior partner. My phone's been buzzing all morning with calls from unknown numbers, and I'm pretty sure at least half of them are from Chun Enterprises trying to track me down. Sarah's assistant, Lisa, is probably working her way through every directory she can find, because when Sarah Chun wants to talk to someone, she finds a way to make it happen. It's one of the things I've always admired about her. She doesn't take no for an answer, especially when it comes to protecting her business interests. I let the calls go to voicemail for now. There's something to be said for making people work a little bit to reach you, especially when you know they're going to be asking you to save them from a disaster they created for themselves. Besides, I want to see exactly how this plays out according to Sabrina's brilliant new customer retention strategy. According to my inside source, and by that I mean Eli, who's been keeping me updated with the kind of regular reports usually reserved for war correspondents, Sabrina's team sent Sarah the same mass email they sent to Morrison, followed by an invitation to the same generic webinar about transitioning to excellence. They might as well have sent her a form letter that said, "Dear valued customer, we've decided your account isn't important enough to warrant personal attention anymore. Please enjoy this PowerPoint presentation about how much better off you're going to be." The beautiful thing about Sarah Shan is that she doesn't waste time with polite corporate theater when she's pissed off. Where Morrison at least attended the webinar before telling them to shove it, Sarah didn't even bother logging in. She went straight to her legal team and had them review her service agreement, probably while muttering Chinese curse words under her breath that would make a sailor blush. Eli texted me around lunchtime with an update that made me laugh so hard I nearly choked on my sandwich. Apparently, Sarah's lawyers called the company's main line and asked to speak with whoever was in charge of honoring contractual obligations. When they got transferred to Leonard Cross, they informed him that Chin Enterprises was exercising their immediate termination rights under Section 3.2 of their service agreement. Effective immediately. No phone call, no negotiation, no opportunity for Sabrina to explain her wonderful new approach to customer service. Just a polite but firm legal notice that they were done. And would someone please provide instructions for the return of any company property and the final billing reconciliation? $18 million gone, just like that. But wait, there's more, because client number 3, the Peterson Group, apparently heard about what happened to Morrison and decided they didn't want to wait around to see what kind of excellence transition was headed their way. Marcus Peterson, the CEO, is the kind of old-school businessman who believes in getting ahead of problems instead of waiting for them to land on his desk. Marcus called the company directly and asked to speak with me. When they told him I was no longer with the company, he asked who was taking over my accounts. When they started giving him the same song and dance about team-based approaches and streamlined processes, he cut them off mid-sentence and said, "Send me the termination paperwork." Just like that. No drama, no negotiations, no last-ditch efforts to save the relationship. Marcus Peterson has been in business for 40 years, and he knows the difference between a company that values relationships and one that's just going through the motions. When your dedicated account manager gets fired without so much as a courtesy call to let you know what's happening, that tells you everything you need to know about how much they actually value your business. $24 million gone before they even had a chance to send him the welcome packet for his new account management experience. That brings the running total to $60 million in lost revenue. And we're not even 2 weeks into Sabrina's reign of terror. Client number 4, Blackstone Holdings, is still on the calendar for the end of the month, but at this point, I'm starting to think they might not even wait for their renewal date. Word travels fast in business circles, and when 3 major companies all terminate their relationships with the same vendor within 2 weeks, people start asking questions. The best part, Sabrina's apparently convinced herself that this is all just a temporary setback, a minor adjustment period while their clients get used to the new and improved service model. According to Eli, she's been holding daily crisis management meetings where she talks about aggressive client retention strategies and proactive damage control initiatives. It's like watching someone try to put out a forest fire with a garden hose while insisting that they've got everything under control. The denial is so complete, so perfectly delusional, that it's almost admirable in its own way. I'm sitting here in my makeshift command center, watching the red circles on my whiteboard turn into confirmed kills. And I can't help but smile. Sabrina thought she was firing dead weight. Turns out she was cutting the anchor line, and now she gets to watch her ship drift toward the rocks. You know that moment in a poker game when someone's been bluffing all night? And suddenly they realize they're holding a pair of 2s while everyone else has been building actual hands. That's exactly what happens when my phone rings at 7:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and the caller ID shows Jonathan Kane, CEO. I'm sitting in my kitchen, still in my pajama pants, drinking coffee from a mug that says, "World's Best Dad," which my kid gave me last Father's Day before she learned about irony when the man himself decides to grace me with a personal phone call. Now, Jonathan Kane is what you'd call old-school corporate America. He's the kind of CEO who still wears suspenders, calls everyone by their last name, and probably thinks email is just a fad that'll blow over once people come to their senses. He's been running companies since before PowerPoint was invented. And he's got that particular brand of executive arrogance that comes from never having to actually do the work himself. I let it ring 3 times before I answer because there's something deeply satisfying about making a CEO wait when he's calling to gravel. When I finally pick up, his voice comes through the speaker like gravel being poured into a cement mixer. "You are required to return immediately." He barks without so much as a hello or "how are you doing?" No pleasantries, no acknowledgement that he's calling someone who was just ceremoniously fired by his own wife in front of half the company. Just straight to the demands like I'm some kind of indentured servant who forgot to show up for work. I take a slow sip of my coffee and let the silence stretch out for a few seconds, just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Good morning to you too, Jonathan. Lovely weather we're having, don't you think? This is not a social call, he growls. Your contract allows us to compel performance. Refuse and we'll sue. And there it is. The corporate equivalent of a playground bully threatening to tell the teacher if you don't give him your lunch money. Jonathan Kane, master of industry, captain of commerce, has apparently decided that the best way to handle this situation is with threats and legal intimidation. It's like watching someone try to perform surgery with a sledgehammer while insisting they're being precise. Compel performance, I repeat, making sure to put just enough amusement in my voice to let him know I'm not exactly trembling with fear. That's an interesting phrase, Jonathan. Very dramatic, very forceful. Did Leonard help you practice that line, or did you come up with it all by yourself? The pause that follows is so long I can practically hear his blood pressure rising through the phone. Jonathan Kane is not used to being talked to like an equal, let alone someone who's supposed to be begging for his job back. In his world, when the CEO calls, people jump. When the CEO makes demands, people say, "Yes, sir," and "How high, sir?" And "Would you like me to shine your shoes while I'm at it, sir?" Your employment contract clearly states, he starts, but I cut him off. Actually, Jonathan, let's talk about my employment contract, since you brought it up and all. Have you actually read it recently? I mean, really read it. Not just the parts that Leonard highlighted for you in his little summary memo. Another pause, longer this time, and that's when I know I've got him. Jonathan Kane is the kind of executive who delegates everything to lawyers and accountants and middle managers, then acts surprised when the details don't match his assumptions. He probably hasn't looked at an actual contract in 20 years, preferring to get his information pre-digested in bullet point format by people who actually understand what they're talking about. I don't need to read every line of legal jargon, he says. But there's less confidence in his voice now. The company's position is clear. You have obligations. Oh, I absolutely have obligations. I agree. Settling back in my chair and enjoying every second of this conversation. The question is whether you understand what yours are. See, that's the funny thing about contracts, Jonathan. They're bilateral agreements. That means both parties have rights and responsibilities, not just the employee. I can hear him breathing through the phone, probably trying to figure out whether this is a bluff or if I actually know something he doesn't. The beautiful thing about dealing with executives like Jonathan is that they're so used to having other people handle the details that they're completely helpless when they actually have to understand the specifics themselves. Let me ask you something, Jonathan. I continue getting up to refill my coffee mug. When you fired me, when you had my wife fire me, did anyone bother to review Section 12C of my employment agreement? You know, the part that talks about what happens to non-compete clauses when an employee is terminated without cause. Dead silence. The kind of silence that usually precedes someone realizing they've just stepped in something that's going to be very expensive to clean up. I'll take that as a no, I say cheerfully. How about Exhibit D? Did anyone look at Exhibit D? The part that lists which accounts are considered employee-originated business relationships, because that's a fun little section that I think you're going to find very educational. What are you talking about? He asks. And now his voice has shifted from gravel in a cement mixer to more of a strangled cat in a blender quality. I'm talking about the fact that you just voided my non-compete agreement for my top 4 accounts, which collectively represent about $80 million in annual revenue. I'm talking about key person clauses that specifically name me as the required point of contact. I'm talking about breach of contract penalties that are going to make your quarterly numbers look like a natural disaster hit them. The silence stretches out so long I start to wonder if he's hung up. But then I hear what sounds like papers rustling. Probably Jonathan frantically searching through his desk for documents he should have read before making threats. But here's the really interesting part. Jonathan, I continue because I'm just getting warmed up. Section 12C also includes a lovely little clause about what happens if the company attempts to compel my return to service after an unlawful termination. Want to guess what the penalty is for that? More silence. More paper rustling. And then, in a voice that suddenly lost all its bluster, "What do you want?" "What I want is for you to hang up this phone, walk down the hall to Leonard's office, and have him explain to you exactly how badly you've screwed this up. Then, once you understand the full scope of the legal and financial clusterfucking you've created, you can call me back, and we can have a proper conversation." "This is blackmail," he says, "but there's no conviction in it." It's the kind of half-hearted accusation that people make when they know they're beaten but don't want to admit it. No, Jonathan, this is contract law. Blackmail would be if I threatened to expose something embarrassing unless you paid me money. This is just me explaining the legal consequences of decisions that have already been made. Big difference. I pause to take another sip of coffee, letting him stew in the implications of what I've just told him. Oh, and Jonathan, when you have that chat with Leonard, make sure he explains the lighthouse licensing agreement to you, because that's a whole separate conversation we're going to need to have about intellectual property rights and unauthorized usage. But let's take this one catastrophe at a time, shall we? "You can't," he starts. "Actually, I can and I will. The question is whether you want to do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." I hang up before he can respond because there's nothing quite like leaving a CEO speechless and scrambling to understand how badly he's miscalculated. In about 20 minutes, Leonard Cross is going to get the most uncomfortable phone call of his legal career. And Jonathan Kane is going to learn that threatening people with lawsuits only works when you actually understand what the law says. There's an art to dressing for corporate warfare, and this morning, I'm painting a masterpiece. Standing in front of my bedroom mirror, I'm putting together an outfit that says I'm completely relaxed, while you're having a nervous breakdown. Navy blazer, not black, because black says funeral. And I'm not here to bury anyone, just to watch them dig their own graves. White dress shirt, but no tie because ties are for people who need to prove they belong in the room. Dark jeans instead of dress pants because I want them to remember that I don't work for them anymore. The only jewelry I'm wearing is my wedding ring, which is probably going to be ironic as hell by the end of this meeting. But hey, I'm not the one who decided to mix business with personal vendettas. That honor goes to my loving wife, who's probably sitting in her corner office right now, trying to figure out how her brilliant power play turned into a legal and financial nightmare. My leather folio, the good one, the one I bought when I thought I was going to be a lifer at this company, contains 3 crisp copies of my employment contract, each one tabbed and highlighted like a legal brief. Section 12C is marked in bright yellow on all 3 copies because there's something deeply satisfying about making sure everyone in the room can see exactly where their legal team screwed up. In a separate folder, I've got a decade's worth of lighthouse licensing agreements, all signed by various company executives who probably never bothered to read the fine print. The drive to the office takes me through downtown, past all the usual corporate monuments to capitalism and questionable decision-making. The morning traffic is typical for a Tuesday, a slow-moving parade of people heading to jobs they probably hate, driving cars they can't really afford, listening to radio DJs who think they're funnier than they actually are. But today feels different. Today I'm not just another commuter grinding through another day of corporate servitude. Today, I'm walking back into that building as something much more dangerous than an employee. I'm walking in as someone who holds the keys to their entire operation and doesn't owe them a damn thing. The security desk is still manned by Marcus, who gives me a look that's equal parts surprise and respect when I walk through the front entrance. He knows why I'm here. News travels fast in a building this size, especially when the CEO starts making panicked phone calls to former employees at 7 in the morning. "Back for the show?" he asks quietly as I sign the visitor lock. "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I reply, clipping the temporary badge to my blazer. "This should be more entertaining than anything on Netflix." The elevator ride to the executive floor feels longer than usual, probably because I'm actually looking forward to what's waiting for me instead of dreading another day of cubicle imprisonment. When the doors open, Patricia at the reception desk gives me a smile that says she knows exactly what's about to happen, and she's rooting for me. "Conference room B," she says without me having to ask. "They're waiting for you." Conference room B, the big one with the mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars, and the floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the city. It's where they hold board meetings and contract negotiations and the kind of conversations that determine whether companies live or die. Today, it's going to be the scene of one of the most expensive lessons in contract law this company has ever received. I pause outside the door for a moment, adjusting my blazer and checking my watch. I'm exactly on time, which is important when you're about to demonstrate just how thoroughly someone has underestimated you. Being late would suggest desperation or disorganization. Being early would suggest eagerness to please. Being exactly on time suggests that you're in complete control of the situation. When I open the door, the tableau inside is absolutely perfect. Jonathan Kane is sitting at the head of the table, wearing his usual Powers suit, and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. His face has that particular shade of gray that comes from spending the night reading legal documents and realizing just how badly you've screwed up. Sabrina is sitting to his right, and the sight of her almost makes me laugh out loud. She's dressed for battle in her sharpest business attire. Her hair pulled back in what I call her corporate dominatrix style. And she's wearing an expression that suggests she still thinks she's in control of this situation. The delusion is almost admirable in its completeness. Leonard Cross, their general counsel, is sitting at the far end of the table, surrounded by enough legal documents to build a small fort. Leonard's a good lawyer, probably the only competent person in this entire organization. But right now, he looks like a man who's been asked to perform surgery with a rusty spoon. His usual calm demeanor has been replaced by something that looks suspiciously like barely controlled panic. And then there's Pauline from HR sitting off to the side with a stack of papers. She's shuffling like a nervous dealer in a high-stakes poker game. Pauline's a nice lady, but she's completely out of her depth in this kind of situation. She's probably here because someone thought they needed HR representation, not realizing that this stopped being an HR issue the moment they violated my contract. I take my seat across from Sabrina, directly in Jonathan's line of sight, and place my folio on the table with the kind of deliberate precision that suggests I know exactly what I'm doing. The silence in the room is thick enough to cut with a knife, and I can practically feel the tension radiating off everyone except me. "Good morning, everyone," I say cheerfully, unzipping my folio and pulling out the first set of documents. Beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect weather for a contract review. Jonathan clears his throat and starts to speak, probably launching into some prepared speech about obligation and duty and corporate responsibility. But I'm not really listening to the words. I'm watching their faces, reading the body language, enjoying the way Leonard's pen keeps tapping against his legal pad like a nervous metronome. Before we get started, I interrupt, sliding the first contract across the table. I thought it might be helpful if everyone had a copy of my employment agreement. You know, just so we're all working from the same playbook. I slide the second copy to Sabrina, who accepts it like she's being handed a live grenade. The third copy goes to Leonard, who immediately flips to Section 12C, and starts reading with the kind of intensity usually reserved for bomb disposal instructions. "Now then," I say, settling back in my chair and folding my hands in front of me, "shall we discuss exactly how this is going to work?" There's something absolutely beautiful about watching someone's world collapse in slow motion, especially when that someone spent the last 2 weeks acting like they held all the cards. I'm sitting across from Leonard Cross, the company's general counsel, and I can literally see the moment when the legal implications of their actions hit his brain like a freight train carrying a cargo load of, oh shit. Leonard starts reading my employment contract the way most people read their own medical test results. Quickly at first, hoping for good news, then slowing down as the reality begins to sink in. His eyes are moving across the page with increasing deliberation, and I can pinpoint the exact second when he reaches section 12C, because his pen stops mid-tap and freezes in the air, like someone just hit the pause button on his entire nervous system. "Son of a bitch," he mutters under his breath, probably forgetting that he's in a room full of people who can hear him. Leonard's usually the picture of professional composure, the kind of lawyer who could negotiate a hostage situation while sipping tea and discussing the weather. But right now, he looks like a man who just realized he's been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers, and the board is about to be flipped over. His pen starts moving again, but now it's darting between different sections of the contract, cross-referencing clauses like he's trying to solve a puzzle that keeps getting more complicated with every piece he adds. He flips to Exhibit D, reads for about 30 seconds, then looks up at me with an expression that suggests he's beginning to understand just how thoroughly they've been outmaneuvered. This is... He starts, then stops, probably trying to find a professional way to say catastrophically Youngberg in front of his CEO and the VP who caused this entire mess. Comprehensive, I suggest helpfully. Well written, legally binding. Leonard's face has gone from its usual healthy pink to something approaching the color of day-old oatmeal. He's reading section 12C again, his lips moving slightly as he works through the language, and I can practically see the dollar signs adding up behind his eyes. Section 12C is a thing of beauty, really. It's the kind of contract clause that looks innocuous enough when you're negotiating it, but becomes absolutely devastating when someone actually has to enforce it. The language is simple, elegant, and about as ironclad as legal writing gets. In the event of termination without cause, all non-compete restrictions pertaining to employee-originated business relationships shall be considered null and void, and any attempt by the company to compel continued service shall trigger a mandatory buyout provision equal to 2.5 times the trailing 12-month revenue of all affected accounts. The beauty of that clause is in its simplicity. No wiggle room, no subjective interpretation, no gray areas for lawyers to argue about. They fired me without cause. Check. They attempted to compel my return to service. Double check. The buyout provision is now in effect, and the meter is running. But Leonard's not done reading yet. He's moved on to the really fun part, the section that defines employee-originated business relationships and lists them in Exhibit D. His pen is moving faster now, probably adding up numbers in his head. And with each calculation, his face gets a little paler. Exhibit D is where I really showed my cards when I negotiated this contract 5 years ago. Most employees just accept whatever non-compete language the company throws at them, but I was smarter than that. I insisted on specific language that distinguished between company-generated leads and relationships that I built personally. Morrison Industries, Chen Enterprises, Peterson Group, Blackstone Holdings. All 4 are listed as employee-originated accounts, which means all 4 are exempt from non-compete restrictions if I'm terminated without cause. $80 million in annual revenue. All of it now legally fair game. Jesus Christ, Leonard whispers, and this time he's not even trying to be discreet about it. He's looking at the numbers on Exhibit D like they're written in a foreign language. Probably because his brain is having trouble processing figures this large when they're attached to a legal liability. Sabrina's been watching this entire performance with growing unease, and now she leans forward to read over Leonard's shoulder. I can see the exact moment when she spots the dollar amounts because her confident smirk falters for the first time since I walked into this room. Her eyes dart between the contract and my face, probably trying to figure out if this is some kind of elaborate bluff. What exactly are we looking at here? Jonathan asks, because CEOs hate being left out of conversations, especially when those conversations involve large sums of money and the word liability. Leonard clears his throat and adjusts his glasses, probably buying time while he figures out how to explain this disaster in terms that won't cause his boss to have a stroke right there at the conference table. Well, he begins, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who's about to deliver very bad news to very powerful people. It appears that when we terminated his employment, we inadvertently triggered several contractual provisions that we may not have fully considered. Inadvertently triggered, I repeat, savoring the corporate euphemism. That's a nice way of putting it, Leonard. Very diplomatic. What kind of provisions? Sabrina asks, and there's an edge to her voice now that suggests she's beginning to understand that her brilliant power play might have some unintended consequences. Leonard looks down at the contract, then back up at the room like he's trying to figure out the least damaging way to explain that they've just stepped on a legal landmine. The termination voided his non-compete agreement for his primary accounts, he says slowly, and the CEO's attempt to compel his return to service has triggered a buyout provision. How much? Jonathan asks, cutting straight to the bottom line. Like any good CEO, Leonard does some quick math on his legal pad, double-checking figures that he probably wishes were smaller. Much smaller based on the trailing revenue figures for the 4 accounts listed in Exhibit D, and applying the 2.5 multiplier specified in Section 12C. He pauses, probably hoping the numbers will somehow change if he stares at them long enough. We're looking at approximately $200 million. The silence that follows is so complete you could hear a pin drop in the parking lot. Jonathan's face goes through several interesting color changes, settling on something that resembles an overripe tomato. Sabrina's mouth opens and closes a few times without any sound coming out, like a fish that suddenly found itself on dry land. 200. Jonathan starts, then stops. Probably because his brain is having trouble processing a number that large when it's associated with a legal obligation. Million, Leonard confirms, and the way he says it suggests he's just as shocked by the figure as everyone else in the room. I lean back in my chair and fold my hands behind my head, enjoying every second of their collective realization that they've just created the kind of legal liability that ends careers and bankrupts companies. Of course, I say conversationally, that's just the buyout provision. We haven't even discussed the lighthouse licensing issue yet. You know that moment in a horror movie when the monster you thought was dead suddenly opens its eyes? That's exactly what happens when I mention the lighthouse licensing issue. And I can practically see the hope drain out of everyone's faces like water going down a broken drain. Jonathan Kane, who was already looking like he'd been hit by a truck carrying legal documents, now appears to be contemplating whether jumping out the conference room window might be a viable career move. The what issue? Sabrina asks, and there's a tremor in her voice that suggests she's starting to understand that her brilliant corporate coup has turned into something that might require witness protection and a new identity. But before I can answer, Jonathan's already reaching for his phone with the kind of desperate urgency usually reserved for medical emergencies and lottery winners. His fingers are fumbling with the speed dial like he's trying to defuse a bomb, and I'm pretty sure I know exactly who he's calling. Get me the CFO, he barks into the phone. I don't care if he's in a meeting, on the toilet, or performing open-heart surgery. Get him up here now with the trailing revenue numbers for the past 12 months. While we're waiting for the CFO to arrive with what I'm sure will be very enlightening financial data, I decide to help everyone understand exactly how much deeper this hole is about to get. I reach into my folio and pull out a thick manila folder that's been sitting there like a ticking time bomb. just waiting for its moment to detonate. Since we're all getting acquainted with contract language today, I say, sliding the folder across the table to Leonard, I thought you might want to review the Lighthouse licensing agreements. You know, just to refresh your memory about the intellectual property arrangements we've had in place for the past decade. Leonard accepts the folder like he's being handed his own execution warrant, which, in a way, he kind of is. He opens it carefully, probably hoping that whatever's inside will somehow be less catastrophic than everything else we've discussed today. But hope, as they say, is not a strategy. The Lighthouse methodology isn't just some generic training manual that anyone can pick up and use. It's a proprietary system that I developed over 15 years of trial and error, client feedback, and late-night brainstorming sessions fueled by too much coffee and the kind of determination that comes from actually caring about results. It's the secret sauce that made those 4 major accounts so profitable. The difference between generic customer service and the kind of relationship management that clients are willing to pay premium prices for. And every single year for the past decade, I've licensed it to the company for a specific fee with specific usage rights and specific termination clauses that kick in if the licensing agreement is violated. Leonard's reading through the most recent licensing agreement, and I can tell he's reached the important part because his pen stops moving again. The language is beautifully clear, drafted by the same lawyer who helped me write my employment contract, and it covers all the bases that most people never think about until it's too late. Licensed methodology may only be used in connection with accounts managed by the lessee. Upon termination of lessee's employment, all usage rights revert to licensor unless separately negotiated. Unauthorized usage after termination constitutes willful intellectual property infringement and triggers mandatory statutory damages. Asterisk. When did this licensing agreement expire? Leonard asks, though from his tone, I'm pretty sure he already knows the answer and doesn't like it. The day I was fired, I replied cheerfully, which means that every time someone has used my Lighthouse scripts, templates, or methodologies since then, they've been committing willful intellectual property infringement. And as you can see from Section 7.13, the damages for willful infringement are quite substantial. That's when the conference room door opens and Tom Brennan, the CFO, walks in carrying a laptop and looking like he'd rather be getting a root canal. Tom's a numbers guy, the kind of accountant who can spot a discrepancy from 3 spreadsheets away. But right now, he looks like someone who's about to deliver news that's going to ruin everyone's day. You wanted the trailing revenue numbers? He asks Jonathan, setting up his laptop and trying not to make eye contact with anyone else in the room. Everything, Jonathan says grimly. 12-month trailing revenue for Morrison, Chun, Peterson, and Blackstone. And I want to know exactly when we lost each of them. Tom starts pulling up data on his laptop, his fingers moving across the keyboard with the efficiency of someone who's done this calculation 100 times before. But as the numbers start appearing on his screen, his expression shifts from professional competence to something that looks suspiciously like disbelief. Morrison Industries terminated. 1. He pauses, double-checking his data. Jesus, they terminated 3 days after the employment action. Annual revenue, $18 million. Shun Enterprises terminated 5 days later, also $18 million. Peterson Group terminated early, didn't even wait for renewal. $24 million annually. He keeps reading, and with each number, the silence in the room gets heavier. Blackstone Holdings just sent termination notice this morning. $20 million annually. Total annual revenue impact $80 million. But Tom's not done yet, because apparently the universe has decided that today is the day for complete and total corporate humiliation. He's scrolling through more data, probably the usage logs for their internal systems, when he stops and stares at his screen like he's seeing something that can't possibly be real. There's something else, he says, and the way he says it suggests that whatever's coming next is going to make the $80 million loss look like pocket change. What? Jonathan asks, though from his tone he's clearly not sure he wants to know. According to the system logs, we've been using the Lighthouse methodology on 17 different accounts since the termination date. Sales scripts, client communication templates, retention protocols. All of it. Now it's my turn to look surprised, because I honestly thought they might have been smart enough to stop using my intellectual property once they fired me. But apparently, when you're dealing with people who think firing your top relationship manager is a good business strategy, you can't expect them to understand the finer points of intellectual property law. 17 accounts, I ask, pulling out my phone to access the calculator app. Tom, what's the combined annual revenue for those 17 accounts? Tom's fingers dance across his keyboard for a few more seconds. Then he looks up with the expression of someone who's just calculated the trajectory of an incoming meteor. $140 million, he says quietly. I punched the numbers into my calculator, applying the statutory damages formula that's clearly spelled out in the licensing agreement. Willful intellectual property infringement carries damages of 3 times the licensing fee calculated as a percentage of the revenue generated using the stolen methodology. Leonard, I say, sliding my phone across the table so he can see the calculation. You might want to add this to your damage assessment. Leonard looks at the number on my phone screen, then looks at his legal pad, where he's been tracking the running total of their legal liability. His pen moves slowly across the page, adding figures that probably seemed impossible an hour ago. The intellectual property damages come to approximately $150 million, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. So our total exposure is Jonathan starts, then stops, probably because his brain is refusing to process numbers this large when they're attached to his company's legal obligations. $350,000. Leonard finishes, give or take a few million for incidental damages and legal fees. The silence that follows is so complete, you could probably hear someone thinking in the next building. $350 million. That's not just a lawsuit. That's the kind of corporate extinction event that ends up as a case study in business schools around the world. But wait. There's more. Because while everyone's busy contemplating bankruptcy and career suicide, my phone starts buzzing with a text message from Eli that's going to make this whole situation even more interesting. There's something deeply satisfying about watching powerful people realize they're completely screwed, especially when they did it to themselves, with the kind of spectacular incompetence that should probably be studied by future generations as a cautionary tale. The text from Eli that just lit up my phone is the cherry on top of this corporate disaster sundae. But I'm going to save that particular revelation for dessert. Right now, it's time for the main course. I reach back into my folio and pull out 2 envelopes, one thick, one slightly less thick. Both sealed and labeled with the kind of professional presentation that says, I've been planning this moment for a while. These aren't hastily scribbled notes or last-minute demands. These are carefully crafted proposals that I've been working on since the moment Sabrina marched me out of this building, complete with legal review, financial projections, and enough detail to make a Harvard MBA weep with admiration. Before we continue down this path of mutual destruction, I say, placing both envelopes in the center of the conference table like I'm dealing cards in the world's most expensive poker game, I thought it might be helpful to discuss some alternative arrangements that could benefit everyone involved. Jonathan's staring at the envelopes like they might explode if he looks at them wrong, which, given the way this meeting has been going, is probably not an unreasonable concern. Sabrina is trying to maintain her composure, but I can see the cracks forming in her corporate facade. She's starting to understand that her brilliant power play has turned into something that might require selling vital organs to cover the legal damages. Leonard, bless his heart, is probably the only person in this room who fully grasps the legal implications of what we've been discussing. And right now, he's looking at me like I'm either a genius or a sociopath, possibly both. What kind of alternative arrangements? Jonathan asks, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone who's drowning and just spotted what might be a life preserver floating nearby. I lean back in my chair and fold my hands in front of me, taking a moment to enjoy the complete reversal of power dynamics that has taken place in this room. An hour ago, they thought they were calling me in here to gravel and beg for my job back. Now they're hoping I might throw them a rope before their entire company disappears beneath the waves of legal liability. Well, I begin tapping the first envelope with my finger. Option A represents what I like to call the everyone wins scenario. It's a comprehensive consulting agreement that would allow me to return to managing my client relationships while protecting the company from the rather substantial legal exposure we've been discussing. I slide option A toward Jonathan, but I don't let him open it yet. There's an art to this kind of negotiation, and timing is everything. You have to let them understand exactly how bad their situation is before you offer them a way out. Otherwise, they might think they still have room to negotiate. The consulting arrangement would be structured as follows. I continue pulling out my phone to reference the notes I've been keeping. $900 per hour. That's significantly below my normal rate, by the way, with a minimum commitment of 200 hours payable in advance. The Lighthouse licensing agreement would be reinstated at triple the previous rate, reflecting the increased value of the methodology now that we've seen what happens when it's not properly managed. I can see Jonathan doing quick math in his head, probably calculating that $1,800 for a minimum engagement is a bargain compared to $350 million in legal damages. But I'm not done yet. Additionally, there would need to be a public acknowledgement of the circumstances that led to this situation, including a formal apology for the way my termination was handled and the impact it had on client relationships. And finally, as a gesture of good faith and to ensure this kind of situation doesn't arise again, Sabrina would need to tender her resignation from the VP position, effective immediately. The last part hits Sabrina like a slap across the face. Her carefully maintained composure finally cracks, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I see genuine fear in her eyes. She's beginning to understand that her corporate coup hasn't just failed. It's blown up in her face in the most spectacular way possible. "You can't be serious," she says, her voice climbing toward hysteria. "You can't expect me to resign because of some contract technicality." "It's not a technicality, sweetheart," I reply, using the same tone she used when she fired me in front of half the office. "It's called consequences. You made a series of decisions that have put this company in legal jeopardy, and now someone has to take responsibility for those decisions." But I'm not finished with my presentation yet. I reach for the second envelope, the thicker one, and place it directly in front of Jonathan with the kind of deliberate precision that suggests this is the option I'm really hoping they'll choose. "Option B," I say, my voice taking on the cheerful tone of someone who's about to deliver news that will ruin several people's entire decade, represents what happens if we can't reach an amicable agreement through option A. I don't open option B yet either, because the anticipation is half the fun. Instead, I pull out my phone again and show them the text message from Eli that arrived a few minutes ago. The message is short, but it contains information that's going to make their already impossible situation even worse. "My friend in operations just sent me some interesting news," I say, holding up my phone so everyone can see the screen. Apparently, Blackstone Holdings didn't just terminate their contract this morning. They've already signed a new agreement with Morrison Strategic Partners. That's Morrison Industries' consulting arm, in case you were wondering. And according to my sources, Chin Enterprises and Peterson Group are in advanced negotiations to join them. The implications of what I've just said hit the room like a tactical nuclear weapon. It's not just that they've lost 4 major clients. It's that those clients are now actively working together with a competitor, taking their business relationships and institutional knowledge with them. It's the kind of client exodus that turns quarterly losses into annual disasters. But here's the really interesting part. I continue because apparently I'm not done destroying their day yet. Morrison Strategic Partners has already reached out to me through intermediaries, and they're very interested in bringing me on board as their senior partner for client relationship management. They're offering equity, full autonomy, and the kind of compensation package that would make most people think they'd won the lottery. I let that information sink in for a moment, watching as the color drains from Jonathan's face, and Sabrina looks like she's about to be sick. Which brings us to option B, I say, finally opening the thicker envelope and sliding the contents across the table. If we can't reach an agreement through option A, then I accept the position with Morrison Strategic Partners. Take my 4 whale clients with me, which, as we've established, is completely legal under the circumstances. And you wire the buyout plus intellectual property damages to my account by 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. Leonard picks up the document from option B and starts reading, his face growing paler with each line. It's a detailed invoice for the full $350 million, complete with legal citations, damage calculations, and wire transfer instructions. This is extortion, Sabrina says, but her voice lacks any conviction. She knows it's not extortion. It's just the inevitable result of very bad decisions made by people who thought they were smarter than the contracts they were signing. Leonard looks up from the invoice and shakes his head slowly. No, he says quietly. It's not extortion. This is exactly what our legal exposure would be if this went to court. If anything, option A is incredibly generous considering the circumstances. I stand up and adjust my blazer, taking a moment to look around the room at the faces of people who thought they held all the power an hour ago. Now they're staring at 2 envelopes that represent the difference between corporate survival and complete financial destruction. I'll give you 24 hours to decide, I say, walking toward the door. But I should mention that Morrison Strategic Partners would like an answer by Thursday. So, I wouldn't recommend taking too long to mac. There's a moment in every great revenge story where you get to watch your antagonist realize that they've been playing checkers while you've been playing chess, and their entire world is about to collapse around them like a house of cards in a hurricane. For me, that moment comes when I tap the thicker envelope. Option B with my index finger and watch Sabrina's face go through more color changes than a mood ring at a bipolar convention. I'm standing now, having delivered my ultimatum with the kind of calm precision that comes from knowing you hold all the cards, have read all the fine print, and have spent the last 2 weeks planning this moment down to the smallest detail. The silence in the conference room is so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw. And I'm pretty sure I can actually hear hearts breaking and careers ending in real time. 24 hours, I repeat, slinging my leather folio over my shoulder like I'm heading out for a casual lunch instead of walking away from the most expensive corporate negotiation in this company's history. But honestly, if I were you, I wouldn't wait too long to make a decision. These kinds of opportunities have a tendency to expire when you least expect them to. Sabrina is staring at option B like it's written in hieroglyphics, her eyes scanning the numbers that represent not just financial devastation, but the complete and utter destruction of everything she thought she'd accomplished by firing me. $350 million. It's not just a lawsuit. It's the kind of figure that ends companies, ruins careers, and gets written up in business school textbooks as a cautionary tale about what happens when ambition exceeds competence. This can't be right, she whispers, and there's a tremor in her voice that suggests she's beginning to understand that her brilliant power play has turned into the corporate equivalent of stepping on a landmine while juggling live grenades. These numbers, they're impossible. But Leonard Cross, bless his legally trained heart, is already nodding his head with the grim resignation of someone who's read enough contracts to know when the other side has you dead to rights. Actually, he says quietly, these calculations are entirely accurate. If anything, they're conservative. In court, we'd probably be looking at punitive damages on top of the statutory amounts. I pause at the door, my hand on the handle, and turn back to look at the tableau of corporate destruction I'm leaving behind. Jonathan Kane, master of industry. Looks like he's aged about 10 years in the last hour. His usual confident demeanor has been replaced by something that resembles a man who's just watched his life's work disappear into a legal black hole. Tom Brennan, the CFO, is staring at his laptop screen like he's hoping the numbers will somehow change if he looks at them hard enough. But numbers don't lie, and the financial reality of their situation is as unavoidable as gravity. $350 million in legal liability, plus the loss of $80 million in annual revenue, plus the reputational damage that comes from having your 4 biggest clients walk away in the span of 2 weeks. It's the kind of perfect storm that sinks companies and ends careers. Pauline from HR is shuffling her papers like she's trying to find some policy manual that covers this kind of situation. But there's no corporate handbook for what to do when your VP's personal vendetta destroys the company. She's probably already updating her resume in her head because when word of this gets out, and it will get out because these things always do, everyone, even remotely connected to this disaster, is going to need a new job. But it's Sabrina who really captures my attention, because she's the one who started this whole beautiful mess with her delusions of corporate grandeur and her complete inability to understand the difference between authority and competence. She's reading through option B again, her lips moving slightly as she works through the numbers. And I can see the exact moment when the full scope of what she's done finally penetrates her consciousness. Her face goes from pale to green to something approaching the color of fresh concrete, and her hands are actually shaking as she holds the document. This isn't just about money anymore. This is about the complete destruction of everything she thought she'd built for herself. The corner office, the VP title, the respect of her colleagues, the financial security that comes with executive compensation. All of it about to disappear because she thought firing her own husband would be a good career move. "Oh my God," she whispers. And the way she says it makes it clear that she's finally understanding the true cost of her ambition. Oh my God, what have I done? It's a beautiful moment, really. The kind of perfect karmic justice that makes you believe the universe occasionally gets things right. Sabrina Hale, who walked into my cubicle 2 weeks ago with that predatory smile and her syrup over broken glass voice, is now staring at the wreckage of her own making and realizing that her brilliant corporate coup has turned into professional suicide. Jonathan's jaw is clenched so tight I'm surprised his teeth don't shatter. And when he finally speaks, his voice has the quality of someone who's trying very hard not to scream. How long do we have before this becomes public? It's a good question, and one that shows he's finally starting to think strategically instead of just reactively. Corporate disasters like this don't stay secret for long, especially when they involve client defections and legal liabilities that could bankrupt the company. Well, I say, checking my watch with exaggerated casualness. Morrison Strategic Partners is making their announcement about the new client acquisitions at a press conference tomorrow afternoon. Shen Enterprises and Peterson Group will probably issue their own statements about the partnership shortly after that. And Blackstone Holdings has never been particularly subtle about their business decisions. The implications are clear. By tomorrow evening, the entire industry is going to know that this company lost 4 major clients in 2 weeks, and the speculation about why is going to be absolutely brutal. When potential clients start asking questions about stability and relationship management, the answers aren't going to be pretty. As for the legal proceedings, I continue. I suppose that depends on which option you choose. Option A keeps everything quiet and professional. Option B? Well, let's just say that $350 million lawsuits tend to attract a certain amount of media attention. I open the door and step into the hallway where Patricia's sitting at her reception desk, probably listening to every word that's been said in that conference room for the past hour. She gives me a smile that says she knows exactly what just happened, and she's rooting for me, which is nice because at least someone in this building has good judgment. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. I call back into the conference room, my voice carrying the cheerful tone of someone who's just concluded a very successful business meeting. I'll be expecting your decision by tomorrow afternoon. Don't disappoint me. As I walk toward the elevator, I can hear the explosion of voices that erupts the moment the conference room door closes behind me, shouting accusations. The sound of people who thought they were in control suddenly realizing they're passengers on the Titanic and someone just handed them a bucket to bail water. The elevator ride down feels shorter than usual, probably because I'm actually enjoying myself for the first time in 2 weeks. When the doors open in the lobby, Marcus gives me a look that says he knows exactly what just went down upstairs, and he's impressed, despite himself. "How'd it go?" he asks quietly. "Better than expected," I reply, signing out on the visitor log with a flourish. Much better than expected. By the time I reach my car, my phone is already buzzing with a text message from the senior partner at Morrison Strategic Partners. The message is short and to the point. "When can you start?" I look back at the building where I spent 15 years of my life, where I built relationships and generated revenue and made other people rich while they took me for granted. Tomorrow, that building is going to be the epicenter of one of the most spectacular corporate meltdowns in recent memory. And it's all because someone thought I was replaceable. Turns out I wasn't the replaceable one after all.